Water History, episode 133, Thursday, better late than never. Richard, what's going on?
It took me the entirety of 7 months, but a New Year's resolution of 2024 has been accomplished. I've read Ludwig von Mises' Human Action, his great magnum opus, an economic treatise for everyone par excellence. And you can complain about why it took me so long, but I wanted to read it in detail. 51 pages of notes.
Are you
It's
going to
just
publish
that
the notes?
jam-packed. What's that?
Are you going to publish the notes?
I'll put them on the blog. They are essential material for my next book. Hopefully a couple years. It'll take a while, but it's going to be based. It's going to be in an obligatory way, a must read, and one that I suspect will illuminate both Catholic and freedom loving minds. That's the hope, at least.
Awesome. What's the one takeaway?
The one takeaway that reverberates in my head after having read it and finished all of it yesterday is there are really only two choices when we get to who comes to dominate and who determines value in an economy. You either have what Mises calls the dominance and the supremacy of the consumer, or you have the dominance and supremacy of the government, or in lieu of government, some outside agency that sets valuation and dictates what you ought to find of worth. There's no alternative. You can have one system superimposed upon another, but there's going to be one dominant sphere, and the repercussions of that are going to be felt by nearly everyone as we engage in social cooperation. In many ways, and it's apropos of my proposed book, it's very much like the church. And why I say that is because you have an extant functioning body of believers, ecclesia Dei, the community of God founded by Christ from the cross and then enlivened by his resurrection. And then you have an ape church superimposed upon it. I'm not speaking of Protestant denominations or those outside of the proper body of Christ. I'm speaking of the Malfeasant church that someone like Archbishop Vigano speaks of, where you have this superimposition, and that's the effects of that are clear when you have idol worship of the Pachamama in the Vatican, or you have, as happened just this past week, the man who's supposed to be, at least by his own assertion, the successor of St. Peter and the Vicar of Christ, and a paucity, a very small number of fellow bishops coming out to speak out against the blasphemy and the perfidious nature of all of these opening ceremonies and things going on at the demonic Olympic Games. By the way, the Roman emperors banned the Olympics because they thought it was too demonic and tawdry. So only modern times do we bring it back, and suspect that it's going to have some positive effect of bringing nations together. As, by the way, Russian athletes can't even compete under their national flag, and nor will the Russian anthem be sung should any of them win a medal or a gold medal for that matter. So we have that complication. The point being is that the president of Iran and various Islamic leaders, secular and religious, Iran's gone so far as, well, Erdogan in Turkey has openly condemned the blasphemy of the Last Supper at the Olympic Games. And then beyond that, the Iranians have recalled their ambassador to France. And as Taylor Marshall rightly, he's kind of got a time clock, a stopwatch timer in the back. How many days is it going to be until that, again, supposed vicar of Christ, who I've already made the incontrovertible argument in my mind that he's an anti-pope. Well, when is he going to speak on this? Can you imagine any of the apostles or any of the faithful founders and doctors of the church, the fathers of the church, not speaking on this?
He still hasn't said anything.
He hasn't said anything. All's well in the Vatican. One could suspect that he doesn't say anything because his silence is approval or tacit admission that France, the eldest daughter of the church, has fallen. That there's, why would you not come out in defense of those French Catholics who are terribly embarrassed and ashamed of the Mason / Republican / nationalistic hedonism and secularism that is the state religion, the official religion of France? See, people get confused that right around the turn of the century, in fact, in 1901, France became a laicized nation, a nation laïque in French. And what that means is it's purely a secular republic. The Third Republic declares itself to be fully secularized and, if not openly opposed to the Catholic Church, which in reality de facto it is, by de jure it's no longer connected. It no longer supports its institutions in an official capacity or formal capacity. But France never abandoned a faith. It abandoned Catholicism. It just simply substituted Catholicism with this paganistic worship of state and etatism and a type of positivism that argues that science and scientism, the heirs of modernity or the wares of modernity, the instruments of modernity, are to be the new gods. That's all. And there's no life in that.
Right.
So what I would characterize when people ask me about what's going on during the Olympics and in Greater France, during all of these hedonistic rituals and disgusting and perverse actions, public actions, is especially after, to my mind, what COVID did to scientism is what World War II did to positivism, or World War I, excuse me, did to positivism, or greater at the time modernity. So what I mean by that is, gone were after World War I, given the death and destruction and the devastation that it wrought, the collective psyche of the world, but with greater precision, Europe, was ruined. The idea of linear progress and the supposed continued ascent, if you will, of humanity toward greater heights in this type of global or international hubris was destroyed. Conversely, with COVID, because it's such an obvious debacle, it's such an obvious hoax, it was such an obvious ploy to depopulate, to infuse and inject a compliant resignation and a willingness to sacrifice human life. To what end? Whatever it might be, false contentions or false ideas about prosperity that comes from depopulation or saving the planet or the like. all of those frustrations are now boiling over, and you have these hellish eruptions, these kind of burps of hell being expressed like a volcanic eruption, but it comes from it emerges from the latent but now open frustrations of a people who have abandoned God and started to worship creation, worship nature as they perceive it, and and they're in open defiance of reality and thus God's divine and natural law. That's got to be frustrating when none of it works, because it can't.
Why can't it work?
Because anything that's at war with reality, we can, in our imagination and even to a degree, lie to ourselves that what is contradictory and outside of reality so there's nothing more reasonable than to cling to the crucified one, because given the plight of humanity, given our human condition, we need that salvation. So as I would evade the horn of a rhino, given reality of it charging toward me, so too I must cling to the cross if I want happiness, life fulfillment, and a propitious and happy end to my pilgrimage here. What's irrational and at war with truth is to cling to one's very limited and inconsequential identity. Your identity doesn't save you. Far from it. So insofar as you identify with the suffering, you identify with those who are engaged in a desire for the good and an uncovering and appreciation for truth and sagacity and wisdom. And as Christ commands us, you love your neighbor as yourself, and you're willing to die for your friend out of the greatest sign of love. Well, then that's what provides meaning, purpose, and then ultimately a propitious and eternal end with that God who has taken up our nature into himself through the incarnation and his life, death, and resurrection. Mises didn't say any of that in there, but man, there's such truth in the book, in Human Action, that it shocks me to think of him as being agnostic. And I wonder and hope and pray that at some point at the very end, he saw total light and is seeing total light. He earned it in his pilgrimage here.
Yeah. Let's talk Bob Moran.
Let's talk about sagacity. Sagacity in art.
You want to talk about this first?
Please. This is a post that Bob put out this past week, and it's timely and important, serendipity being what it is, because of the Southport killings in England. So for those unaware, and you should be by now, a migrant from Rwanda, a psychopath, well, probably a sociopath too, went into a daycare center in Southport in England and stabbed several children. 3 beautiful, lovely girls died. Several were severely injured and are in critical condition. And as I found out through Twitter and a couple sources from the UK just yesterday, one of the reasons that there wasn't even a greater fatality number is because one of the teachers in the daycare heroically was shielding the children, and she herself was attacked viciously, and she was in very critical condition, but it looks like she, through a variety of surgeries, is going to survive.
Should read this.
So Bob, and if you don't know Bob Moran by this point, we've talked about him on the podcast, but he's the greatest cartoonist alive today, political cartoonist to be sure. And you can't there are a lot of heroes. There are a number of heroes who emerged during the COVID crisis, but it was through he calls it his pencil, his artwork and the fruit of his work that he led a great rebellion to which many attached themselves, including myself, during the COVID hysteria, pandemic, and anti-human movement. So he has this great piece, and Charlie's going to read it for now, or right now.
The way all of this plays into the agenda is more nuanced than simply dividing people according to their reaction to different events. It's about confusing, inverting, and eroding their basic values, forcing unconscious hypocrisy and presenting caveats for core beliefs that shouldn't have any. It is designed to distort our foundational principles to such an extent that we no longer bother to remember them, much less be guided by them. Instead, we simply look to the mechanism of the state to tell us what to say and when, without ever thinking about anything at all. That's profound already. Everything that's been happening since 2020 targets children. It strips them of their innocence and puts the selfish desires of adults before the need to protect infants. Some rightly saw that the COVID agenda was wicked because they understood this, until they were shown the same crimes being committed against children in a different context and said it was justified. Others dementedly accepted the need for children to be tortured and killed by lockdowns and injections, but were then rightly appalled at the sight of them being ripped apart by Israeli missiles. The latest horrific attack on children in Southport has demonstrated the same level of inconsistent moral values in many people. This worries me. This is not the sign of a healthy humanity moving in the right direction. It has nothing to do with how much you care about one or the other. I'm not suggesting anyone ought to be affected in exactly the same way by crimes committed abroad as crimes committed on their doorstep, or indeed a lone psychopath murdering 3 children with a knife and the most powerful military force in history obliterating an entire country that does not have an army for 9 months as a hostage retrieval strategy. Clearly, these things are not exactly the same. But, and this is why I will not be accused of stoking division on this issue, everyone should be united in condemning the deliberate killing of children in every circumstance and refusing to support those doing it in any way at all. That should always be enough to unite people. It isn't anymore. Not all division is wrong. When Christ said he had come to bring the sword, he meant that he needed to encourage people to separate themselves from the corruption and godlessness all around them, to find the courage to stand apart with conviction in faith and truth. You don't need to be a Christian to understand the importance of that. We're being pushed towards a one world government state of pure evil. And one of the most important things to keep hold of is the understanding that we are not all the same, and we don't need to be in order to live in peace. The free-thinking individual must ultimately prevail over the collective. However, if we really want to begin the monumental task of creating a better world for our children, it's imperative that some values are shared and understood by all and sanctified beyond all vulnerability. I humbly suggest that the unconditional love and protection of all children should be one such value.
And then he has this beautiful cartoon of his children and wife playing in a type of meadow and rolling hills. And the caption reads, "Put them first, lift them high, teach them balance, let them fly." There's blue skies and natural forming clouds behind them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your take, Charlie?
It's beautiful and it's true. And it's a good explanation of when Jesus talks about division and how he wishes the world was already burning and on fire when he talks about that. And then I love what when he says, I never thought about it this way. Everything that's been happening since 2020 targets children. Even those that, even us thinking about, it's maybe just selfishly being ignorant of not just COVID, but all of the other events since then, and how it's easy when it's right in front of you when you say, oh, they're canceling high school basketball because of the ridiculous mask mandate. But even something like stimulus checks and just inflating the dollar and how much that's going to affect children, that's not as easy to connect the dots on as something like canceling youth sports because of COVID.
Sure. We lose perception of the smaller or those things that we believe to be smaller elements and goings on. A case in point, I forget who, so I wish I could give them credit, but stated that this whole Mr. Beast thing, if you're not familiar, Mr. Beast is a YouTube influencer personality who seems to have limitless funds to give away to people in these ridiculous contests of like hiding out in a mall and then having people try to find you. And if you stay to the end, you get enormous sums of money. What that really detracts from is the hardworking dad who's pulling in $50,000 at his construction job, and the kids might be at home watching this, particularly during the summer, and they see Mr. Beast throwing around money as if there's no cost to it, no work, no tribulation, no effort, and Mr. Beast becomes the more attractive dad, does he not? He's the happy, rich, comfortable alternative to the father who comes home and he's exhausted. As much as he like to, he can't even get the physical strength up to go outside for a bike ride with his son or daughter. Mr. Beast is always there, though, it seems. And it's altogether fitting, too, then, that one of his friends, or what you would call them, collaborators, is this trans guy who abandoned his family and now has been found to be in possession of child pornography. So yeah, these seemingly little intrusions upon the good, and as Bob points out, are fundamental principles. It's almost as if when you're bombarded by gigantic bombs, you don't pay attention to the small artillery that is hitting the walls of the castle, but it's still there and it's still insidious and still breaking down the fortifications. Let's move on to that other cartoon that I wanted to show because I saw such a connection with one of my favorite icons that I have with Saint Joseph and Jesus. So here, what you see portrayed is a great cartoon, and this is from, forget what month. I want to say it was in November of 2020, and this is Bob's classic character. He calls him Clive. So he's your ordinary Englishman. Now, interestingly enough, in his previous and then future cartoons where Clive is featured, he's not as old of a man. So he's more middle-aged, but here he has gray hair and his hairline is much more pronounced. And he's reading a book as he's walking along with a mask on, but not over his nose in the midst of the COVID pandemic and hysteria. The book is entitled, and it's large. It's so large, in fact, that it obscures his vision of the ground. But he's reading and walking along, and the book says "How to Stay Safe," and you know exactly who that's written by. It's written by Boris Johnson, the National Health System, and then Parliament, and the powers and regulatory state in the UK that was at the time. And that same entity, municipality, has removed a manhole cover, and he's about to fall into a sewer pit type of thing. He's stepping one in, he's obviously going to fall. In his left-hand pocket, he has hand sanitizer, which is useless in such a situation, of course, it's useless in all the situations that pertain to this gentleman's existence, this Clive gentleman's existence. And as I was watching Bob Moran's theatrical performance called Artpocalypse, which I really encourage everyone to take a look at. It shows all of the most powerful cartoons he's produced over the past 4 or 5 years, and he has commentary on them. It's really quite poetic. And Tanya Edwards, the very much awake female comedian who happens also to be funny, co-wrote that with him, and he performed it as a somewhat of a one-man show. There's even a band involved, and there's a musical, what would you call it, performance that goes on there, a composition that is played during the piece. He noted that some of the things that you miss are, for example, that the gentleman's right shoe, Clive's shoe, is untied. And what that hit me when he was talking about that his shoe's untied, his right shoe is untied, is because it made me think immediately of how when we need to be grounded and cooperating with natural law and reality, and not be made anxious, fearful, irenic, passive, quietist, and just accepting of what befalls us, both in terms of time here on earth, and then ultimately our eternal destination. We have to pay attention to the important stuff, like the things that we can control, like tying our shoe. It's simple. And yet he, in the cartoon, Clive, is so concerned about how to avoid succumbing to COVID or contracting COVID or anything else that the government might be fear-mongering about, that he doesn't do that which is in his control, that which is both virtuous in terms of just taking care of yourself and being reasonably safe and smart. He's distracted from that. He's distracted from true self-care by all the things and storms that are artificially ranging around him. And then if you could go to the icon, my favorite icon, one of my favorite icons is this one. And I've alluded to this in previous episodes, but I want to dive into it a little bit further today. And sure enough, here's this beautiful icon, an image of St. Joseph, all clad in white, beautiful flowing robes. And the background, it's very desert-like, so it evokes this time in which the Holy Family was in Egypt in exile. And sure enough, in this great way, whereas in other images and even icons, you see Joseph holding Jesus as a baby, or has his arm or guiding Mary and the Madonna as she holds Jesus in a depiction of the Holy Family. Here's St. Joseph by himself, kind of wrestling with Jesus Yeah. It's evocative of Jacob wrestling with God. And then, sure enough, Jesus is almost climbing up his chest and onto his shoulder and reaching up, looking to his Father in heaven. And he's reaching, and then one of the nuances or little elements that people comment on when they look at this icon is that his sandal is traditionally falling off. It's hanging on by a string. So what does this mean? Well, Jesus is fully human and fully divine. His goal is to do the will of the Father, so he's always reaching up for both inspiration, strength from the Father, connection as his divinity impels him and moves him to ascend upward. But he doesn't leave behind his humanity. He doesn't leave behind what makes him, in a sense, vulnerable. He's instead elevating our nature. Yeah. So he's taking with him his human foot and the things that ground him to that which is earthly and the things that would otherwise necessitate his connection to the earth are getting slowly tossed off. Yeah. And it's both the cartoon. I can't assert that Bob was thinking about this common motif within iconography of Jesus' sandal slipping off as he's reaching out to the Father. But it should make me think of how important it is to understand our place within God's creation and our necessity, the need that we have to cling to Christ, who through his incarnation and then ultimately his ascension into heaven brings our nature into the Godhead. I know that's sort of heady theology. It's theosis. It's this notion that we're no longer just meant to go back to a type of paradise like Eden, but we're to be joined to God himself in heaven through this entirely self-sacrificial act of Christ in total love for us and then for the Father. But that's the scandal of Christianity, and it's a scandal that we should embrace among, especially among the more, I wouldn't say mundane, more destructive scandals of our time. We have destructive scandals and we have salvific scandals, and this is the ultimate salvific scandal. Embrace that one. Let's be scandalous, in other words.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've never seen that one.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
They also look more alike.
Yeah, there's clearly
than normal.
Obviously the iconographer is not asserting a genetic
Right.
cause of that.
Yes.
But it is fair and accurate to assert that there is a personality imitation or a resonance, a connection.
Yeah.
He took on the personality of this great man.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder for fathers too, that your glory as a father is to, in many ways, be that help, that aid, that stepping stone or ladder to heaven for your children. To any degree that you inhibit or serve as an obstacle for that, you are indeed a Satan for them. That he may increase, that I might decrease, in the words of John the Baptist.
True. Do you want to talk about a town that needs some more Joseph and Jesus?
Let's do it. Here's our segment.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Should we go to your gay suburb now?
Three short ones today.
Okay.
OPRF hires new director of campus safety. Devitt will be the fourth director in less than 2 years.
Wow.
Oak Park and River Forest School has a new director of campus safety. This will be the fourth person to hold the post in just the past 2 years. Kristen Devitt was hired by the District 200 school board at a special board meeting earlier this month. Devitt, who could not be reached for comment before deadline, currently works as director of security at Kaiser Permanente, a hospital in Honolulu. According to her LinkedIn profile, she has held that post for the past 2 years. She's gonna find out real quick. We're not in Hawaii anymore.
This ain't Kansas anymore. This ain't Honolulu anymore.
She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in sociology from Illinois State University, as well as a master's in adult and continuing education and teaching from the University of Wisconsin-Platteville.
How does that
stop
qualify her to be a director of security?
How does that stop fights in the hallway?
Wouldn't you want a police officer or someone?
We're just gonna think our way out of fights. Devitt will begin at OPRF on August 1st. Her annual salary will be $130,000.
Wow.
But was prorated to $118,544 to reflect her start date. Her hiring was approved by the school board during a closed session portion of a meeting on July 11th.
Wait, if she's only starting in August, why would that be prorated down further?
Yeah, that was confusing to me as well.
Okay.
So
she took a $11,500 haircut because she's starting 8 months into the year? That doesn't make any sense.
is it because there's more school days from August to December than?
Oh, maybe that's it. But she said she's going to begin it on August 1st.
Right.
Oh,
so
okay.
she's still going to have the rest of August, but my guess is that I don't know.
Missed half the previous.
She's making too much money. Is
that's the conclusion. That's the right conclusion. She's making way too much money.
She will be the district's fourth director of campus security in 2 years. Devitt will be replacing Tracy Love, Traccye Love, who resigned from the position in April. Previously, the role has been held by Sherilyn Jones McLeod, who resigned in June 2023, Cindy Guerra, who served for less than 5 months before resigning in November 2023, and Love, who left the district after 5 months.
Boy, they're really retaining these people, huh?
Why do they keep hiring women?
You know why, Charlie?
For this role.
Because you need a gentle touch from the gentler sex. That's why. I'm sure that's in their mind.
The need for a new director was acknowledged by Superintendent Greg Johnson, who told Wednesday Journal that the high school needed, quote, stability. In a previous interview with Wednesday Journal, Johnson expressed how the position can be a, quote, challenging role and requires someone who not only has strong safety experience, but also knows how to work with school districts and school boards. Before her move to Hawaii, Devitt served as the director of office and school safety for the Wisconsin Department of Justice, an instructor for the National Association of School Resource Officers, and lieutenant of patrol for the City of Beloit Police Department. Okay.
Yeah.
There's something on the resume. There's something,
Yes.
There's relevant work experience on the resume. We gotta be fair.
But how did she became a police officer after getting a master's in adult education? Anyway, go ahead.
Devitt comes to the district with 25 years of professional experience in threat assessment, emergency management, interdisciplinary project coordination, and adult education, with a specialty in preventing targeted violence, emergency operations, and critical incidents response and recovery. So it's funny looking at the related articles. This is from December 2023, where they show the OPRF hires Oak Park officer as new safety director. So that was the last one.
Okay.
And then shows the resignation and then another resignation in 2023. So
So what's the over under for this one until she's back in Honolulu?
yeah, I'll give it till New Year's once she faces let's see, she's from Wisconsin, so I think she might miss that warm weather. Going from cold to warm is hard.
That's
And
a
then
tough one.
after you go back to cold, I just think
Yeah.
it gets a little colder. You feel it a little colder the second time.
Mm.
We'll see. We don't want anyone to get hurt. We'll wish her luck.
Yeah, good luck for you. You'll be back in Honolulu. You'll be back in Maui in February.
Oak Park to move forward with Village Hall remodel plans. Get ready to throw up with the financial numbers in this one.
Oh man, because we did one of these.
We sure did. It's
They
been
were talking
ongoing.
about it. Was it about a year ago?
It's been an ongoing conversation. Yeah. Has it been a year? Yeah.
Maybe.
Trustees want to balance their remodel goals with cost concerns. It gets disgusting in here. Like it made me a little nauseous
All right, I'm ready.
the first time. After more than a year of discussions and analysis, Oak Park trustees are moving forward with plans to remodel the existing Village Hall structure and build a new police station. Two options were still on the table, according to village officials. One was to build a new police station and renovate the current Village Hall facility. That could cost between $132 million to $138.3 million. The other was to redevelop or demolish and rebuild the entire Village Hall campus. That was estimated to be $139.4 million to $144.7 million.
Translation, it's going to cost $200 million.
Yeah, so much for defunding the police.
Yeah, oh, good point. Good point.
Village staff asked trustees Tuesday if they'd like a feasibility study from Johnson Lasky Candelen Architects for the narrowed down options at a cost for the study not to exceed
The
$265,000.
study itself is going to cost $265,000.
Trustees decided not to spend the extra money, instead directing village staff to move forward with planning for the renovation option. The price tag for renovation, which doesn't come cheap, however, was not viewed favorably by some trustees. Balancing board goals for Village Hall improvements with cost constraints might prove to be easier said than done. Village staff suggested using the feasibility study to see if a $100 million cap on the project was possible, but even that was too high a price for some trustees. Quote, "The one thing that would annoy Oak Parkers about spending all of this money is if services were disrupted," said Colette Lueck, Facility Review Committee co-chair. Quote, "People pay a lot of taxes to live here, and what they expect for those taxes are high services. That's why things like leaf pickup become a big deal."
Back to the leaves.
Background. In July 2023, the village board proposed demolishing and rebuilding the historic Oak Park Village Hall at an estimated cost of between $118 million and $124 million. But demolition was met with strong public opposition, so the board began to consider other options.
What's all the more crazy about this is that, of course, you need a gigantic facility to house all of the different people who work there to enforce fines and regulations and all the things that are completely unnecessary and parasitic upon the already existing Oak Park population. So it's like double parasite. The double parasite effect, I'll call it.
The Facility Review Committee recommended in April that the village board build a small glass addition to Village Hall, removing all police functions and moving council chambers to the lower level. JLK estimated this option to cost between $39.2 million to $41.2 million, excluding the additional cost of the new police station, which was undetermined. At a study session in May, village trustees asked for revised plans. Trustees agreed then that the police station was a top priority and that the rest of Village Hall needs change, but weren't yet clear on what that would look like. Meanwhile, there's a bit of a ticking clock for the board to approve plans together before some of their seats go up for election in the spring, Lueck pointed out. Lueck is a former village trustee. There's also pressure due to the poor conditions of the police station, Lueck said. Quote, I was skeptical whether or not the architects would be able to really address all the concerns, she said. The building is interesting, significant, but outdated and not functional. That being said, I do believe that the committee and its work with its consultants were able to address all the concerns. Maintaining the current village hall is also more sustainable than tearing down and rebuilding, Lueck said. Trustees agreed, and it might be the least disruptive option for village staff, she said. Trustees discussion. It's going to be challenging to rehab Village Hall, Village President Vicky Skaman said, but she said the best way to move forward is on the village's land. This building,
Thank you, Vicky.
quote, this building and the openness of government, our accessibility is important to us, she said. Village Hall isn't just a place for meetings, but it's one where we want the residents of Oak Park to feel as if they are cared about.
By finding them excessively and collecting their taxes?
No matter what, it's likely to be expensive, Skaman pointed out. In improving Village Hall, construction crews may discover unexpected issues. Here we go. In the nearly 50-year-old building that will need to be fixed. Looking for creative ways to fund the project is one option to assuage cost concerns, she said. Trustee Lucia Robinson agreed that renovating the existing structure is the most cost-efficient path forward. One of her priorities is ensuring safety in the council chambers, she said. The facility review committee had raised the concern that if trustees needed to get out quickly, they could be trapped because the stadium seats cascade down. And if everyone attending needed to leave in an emergency, it could be difficult to do so. Here we go. Renovating is the right option from a historic preservation and sustainability perspective. Trustee Ravi Parakat agreed. One of his top concerns is the cost. He said he is not in favor of spending even $100 million on this project and that the board needs to make decisions based on what they can afford.
Wow.
He's like a caricature now.
Yes, he is.
Someone that just says, that's a little too much money. Like he's just the cheap caricature now.
Sure. The thorn in the side.
Trustee Corey Wesley proposed another alternative Tuesday, saying he was against both rehabilitation and demolishing and rebuilding Village Hall. It's too expensive either way, he said. He suggested building a new police station with a few extra floors for village staff. A new space would likely be cheaper, Wesley said. And as more employees work from home in future years, less people will need to utilize Village Hall anyway. But other trustees did not seem on board with his proposal. Village manager Kevin Jackson said village staff will return to the board with further planning and design considerations. That's another point that's just not brought up until the end, is working remotely. How many of these people actually need to be
right
working at the location?
Or wouldn't the more feasible thing to be there are whole plots of land and I'm sure commercial office space that's going for a pittance right now. Just go and rent space somewhere.
You're saying somewhere else?
No, in Oak Park. Just so away from, so take that building, whatever they want to do with it, demolish it, sell it off to private developers. Then take the money and just spend it on rent for whatever private building you want, and that's your village hall.
Right. Yeah. Last one. A queer coming of age short film set in Oak Park in the works for next summer.
Fantastic.
Semi autobiographical film. I don't know how a film can be. I don't know how you can be semi. Have you ever heard that before?
It just means somewhat instead of half here. It's a rough. It's a story based on some facts.
Semi autobiographical film written and produced by village resident who describes it as a love letter to village and city.
Oh, I'm already throwing up in my mouth.
An independent filmmaker is coming back to her roots to create a coming of age short film set in Oak Park. Grace Mellon, the writer and producer of the film, started acting professionally at age 13. Now 28, she is continuing her passion for acting and writing with her third independent short film, Girl Crush, slated for filming next summer. Girl Crush is a queer coming-of-age story about a 13-year-old who develops a really intense crush on her cousin's friend who is 26. And it's kind of semi-autobiographical, Mellon said.
Bob Moran, get your pen ready. This is disgusting already. Okay.
She said the film comes from her experiences growing up in Oak Park and finding her sexuality as a young teenager. Quote, "It is this time that I remember so viscerally of being stuck in between childhood and adolescence and kind of not wanting anything to do with either of them," Mellon said. Mellon graduated from Roosevelt University in 2021 with a degree in elementary education. Soon after, she took a, quote, permanent road trip to Los Angeles to pursue her acting and screenwriting career. Mellon said it was hard finding a foothold amidst the film scene that had fewer do-it-yourself opportunities compared to Chicago. She mostly worked as a teacher, but found interesting perceptions from the young teenagers she taught in her classes.
Yeah, how'd you like to have your young teenager as with this person? By the way, why is she working with young teenagers if she has a degree in elementary education?
Quote, "I started the script after having taught for a few years with this idea of recognizing that kids are a lot more open about sexuality."
Good God.
Said Mellon, who recently moved back to Oak Park. Mellon said she
Just
was
Society, this chick would already be in the stocks in the Village Square.
Mellon said she was about 13 when she realized she was bisexual, but did not then feel comfortable coming out. The genesis for Girl Crush came out of what would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, "No, I'm gay," Mellon said. The story, that's going to get clipped. The story explores the ideas of finding sexuality using the setting of damn it. The
Charlie Westerman declares.
The story explores the ideas of finding sexuality using the setting of Oak Park and her own experiences growing up to deliver an authentic coming-of-age story. Quote, "It's really an exploration of sexuality and an acceptance of sexuality," Mellon said. At its core, it is a coming-of-age story and a love letter to Oak Park and Chicago. Nadia von Ebers, a Los Angeles-based writer and the director of Girl Crush, has known Mellon for 10 years. They met when Mellon was her student at the Chicago Academy for the Arts, when von Ebers taught at the Visual and Performing Arts High School. While at the Academy, von Ebers directed 2 short films Mellon wrote, including Bath Salt, which premiered at the 2017 Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. Now, von Ebers has the challenge of determining what a queer coming-of-age story should look like. Quote, "I've talked about bringing it to life through lots of relational, intimate, close and tight shots that explore Ivy's, the protagonist's growing self-awareness, as well as her proximity and shifting connections to the people around her and to the world at large," von Ebers said.
Verbal vomit. Just what does that mean?
I don't know.
It's a movie about, yeah.
The film is expected to take place around Oak Park in Chicago. Quote, "In a nutshell, it's a story about how longing and desire deliver us to ourselves."
Oh God. What the fuck does that mean?
What does that even mean?
No. In that way, my hope is that this story is relatable to everyone. It's not, no. How could it be, if it's a queer journey, how could it be relatable to everyone?
The team is actively looking for local businesses, actors, and people to fill producer roles. Richard, if you want to start the Hot Water History production company. They're also seeking financial help through a partnership with the Los Angeles nonprofit. All donations made to reach the $40,000 crowdfunding goal are tax deductible, Mellon said. Janet Ulrich Brooks, a Chicago-based actor and acting coach, taught Mellon acting when she 11. That's acting when she 11. So that meant to say
when
taught
she was
Mellon
11.
acting when she was 11. She said that she remembered Mellon as a hardworking outlier amongst her young students. Quote, I started coaching her for her auditions, and she was just such a hard worker. She had a drive and a passion for it, Brooks said. Certain times parents are actually more involved in it than they are. With Grace, she was always driven. She wanted the work. Mellon said she wants to create an authentic representation of Oak Park, and the community is a meaningful part to the broader story.
So
Quote,
it's a horror film, in other words.
it's a good background for Ivy because she's this girl who's very independent, smart, and confident. I think I was all of those things only because I was from here, because it was a town that nurtured those traits, Mellon said. For more information about the film, visit its Instagram page at Girl Crush Movie or Tiny URL. They have the link here. I'm gonna pull up the Instagram right now. See if there's anything good on here real quick.
Sure you are, because you're a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot here.
Doesn't seem like there's a whole lot to this movie.
Coming out in the summer of 2025.
We'll see.
Anyways, that's
That was it.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay.
Instead of going to Girl Crush Movie, go watch Artpocalypse with Bob Moran. That'd be my suggestion, and you won't be disappointed. You'll be a healthier, better person as a result.
Yeah. Oak Park.
That's all I could say.
There's not much else to say.
Yeah. Support our sponsor. Go and buy stuff from Trevor at tridentinbrewing.com. Go buy me a beer at buymeacoffee.com/Gary Richide.
Buy me a beer.
Yeah, you could do that. You buy Charlie a beer. You could even put, I want this beer for Charlie and Gary shall not drink it on my buy me a coffee.
I feel like I
Or
need
you
one
could-
after reading the Wednesday Journal.
Yes, exactly. And then also go buy the book. Everything, all links are available on our website, hotwaterhistory.com, along with just a plethora of unending, beautiful work. Historical, economic, theological, philosophical, you name it. Go get some.
Amen. All right, everyone.
Amen. Until next time, peace.
God bless.